Hi, everybody. On the eve of Merry Christmas, just a week to go, rather 10 days to go for a hopeful 2021. इस टाइम मेरे को बहुत अच्छा गाना याद आ गया अचानक। हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। मन में है विश्वास, पूरा है विश्वास, हम होंगे कामयाब एक दिन। 2020 ऐसा रहा कि चैलेंजेस लाया और अपॉर्चुनिटीज भी लाया, और इतना विश्वास है 2021 से 2021 नहीं 2021 से कामयाबी ही कामयाबी रहेगी सबको। सो विद दैट विशेस आई वेलकम, besides my panelists, my attendants, my audience, my fans, when I say my fans, Ray Talks fans across the globe, for this a very, very special edition on pesticides management bill. Friends, this is not an ordinary subject. This needs very much expertise, and I'm not in this. So besides thanking formally, I would like to thank first my moderator, our moderator, Asitava, for taking up this very difficult challenge, because I would have not done this. So with that, friends, today's pesticide management bill will be discussing various aspects of, how adversely it is affecting the pesticide manufacturers. Will it adversely affect their sales? Many kind of thoughts going in the people's mind. Will the licensing officer, if satisfied that the holder of the license has contravened any of the provisions of this act or rules made thereunder, the licensing officer may revoke the license? Will it prohibit the distribution, sale, or use of the pesticides of a specific batch in an area, or for the specific period, or for the entire company's products? How will it, if at all, hurts India's agricultural system, including agrochemical exports? And very important, how will the new pesticide management bill fare on the farmers? Friends, to discuss this and much more, I have with me the fantastic panel, fantastic experts. When I say experts, not just in the field of agricultural business which they are into, but experts, they know on their fingertips what this bill is all about. So let's hear from them. I have CropLife CEO, Asitava Sen. I have Dr. C.D. Mai, the most respected person in the country in ag industry or ag field. I have Ankit Veermani, young, smart partner of Veermani and Veermani, who is an expert into pesticides and insecticide laws. I have Dr. Ajay Kumar from Corteva and Anil Kakkar from Sumitomo Chemicals. Friends, before I introduce to them, each one of them, let me take you through my routine of introducing myself and Ray Consulting. I founded Ray Consulting after a long 25 years stint in the ag industry, having worked with companies like Rallis, Cheminova, now FMC, PI Industries, and my last assignment being head of marketing, Nagarjuna Group. Somehow, I felt about a decade ago that there is a space for ag consulting in India, and we could do with an integrated platform in this domain. Hence, Ray Consulting was born. We understand the unique dynamics and economics of agricultural value chain, the critical issues and challenges seeking to grow and elevate performance. Ray Consulting works with all the segments of agri-value chain, whether it's technology, digitization, startups, agchem, seeds, and nutrition, and name it. I am also executive director of an association called Bioagri Inputs Producers Association, BIPA. Ray Talks, which is a day of this pandemic time, started on April 25th. Now we are almost 37th. Today's 37th episode happening. We had it every Saturday, except that we gave a gap of 3 weeks during post-Diwali. Now propose that we are here again. This is the only dedicated talk show in agriculture in the world, happening every Saturday. The series invites, as you have seen even now today, leaders from across the cross-section in agri to share their experiences and guide. We have audience from over 33 countries registering. Today, we have 19 countries registering for this webinar. Now, let me introduce to each one of my panelists in alphabetical order. Anil Kakkarji. He is the Vice President currently at Sumitomo Chemical India and is also Vice Chairman of CropLife India and former Vice Chairman and currently Director of Crop Care Federation of India. Mr. Anil Kakkar is actively involved with Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare for taking up farming related and industry related issues. Mr. Kakkar has played a key role in establishing concept of integrated pest management at farmer level, involving agri-scientists and further enriching it with integrated nutrient management, which has given new concept called integrated crop management. Awesome idea. One side pesticides, another side nutrition, which is in today's farm practices includes safe and judicious use of AgChem, that is both pesticides and fertilizers. Anil sir, I welcome you. It's always been an honor to be, talking to you every time and take something new from you. And now I have young, don't go with his looks, very handsome, smart, Ankit Veermani. When I said don't go with his looks, don't go with his softness. He means business, whatever he could do. Ankit earlier worked at Wadia Gandhi and Company in Mumbai, and now is a partner at Veermani and Veermani Law Firm. His expertise include insecticide law. The firm has experience of almost 3 decades in the field of policies, guidelines issued by registration committee, import quotas that are imposed by registration committee, pesticide management bill. He does review of insecticides under Anupam Verma committee, Dr. Malhotra committee, bans and other restrictions on sale of insecticides. So many things he does. Now he's also worked on proposed ban on 27 pesticides by central government. Ankit, I welcome you to this awesome show. And thanks for changing your plans to travel to Bangalore and staying back for this show. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Then I have Asitava Sen, extremely good, I would say, like we have Zubin Mehta, the music conductor. Asitava is known for conducting, collaborating industry, bringing together on various issues. He's doing an awesome job. Asitava is the Chief Executive Officer of CropLife India. Prior to CropLife India, Asitava had worked in leadership and senior advisory positions for the various multinational organizations such as the World Bank Group, the World Economic Forum, Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, and the Rabobank. CropLife India, as we all know, is an industry association of 15 R&D-driven member crop science companies, jointly representing approximately 70% of crop protection market and responsible for about 95% of the molecules that are introduced in the country. Asitava, welcome. I have with me the ever popular, ever energetic, always active Dr. C.D. Mai. Dr. C.D. Mai, as we all know, I doubt if there's anybody in this country who doesn't know him, is a renowned cotton scientist and is currently serving as the president of the South Asia Biotechnological Center, that is SABC, New Delhi, and is also chairman of AFC India Limited. Dr. Mai is committed himself for the growth of Indian agriculture. He was elected as fellow member of several scientific committees and associations across the globe and is recipient of many awards. Dr. Saab, aapka swagat hai. Now then I have Ajay. Dr. Ajay, amazing personality with a lot of knowledge. Ajay, comes, I was surprised when I read his CV, and he has served in Indian Forest Service earlier in Government of India. and various positions, both in state governments and Government of India, including Ministries of Environment, Defense, and Agriculture. In 2010, Dr. Ajay joined the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, that is CIMIT, as Head of Government and Legal Affairs and Country Coordinator for India. Dr. Ajay was instrumental in establishing of Borlaug Institute for South Asia in India, that is VISA, V-I-S-A. Dr. Ajay presently is the Head of South Asia for Government and Industry Affairs for Kochamba. Dr. Ajay, so with this introduction, I think I'm done with my job. I hand over my baton to Asideva to please moderate this panel discussion. And trust me, there was so much excitement amongst all of us that today's discussion will surely help most of us, especially a person like me who's not much aware about this pesticide bill. So along with minimum understanding to maximum understanding in that, each one of us in industry, how can we handle this? So Asideva Saab, all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Raj Agarwal. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. So, I think it is a great initiative from your side to organize this webinar on this very important and relevant topic. And also, I welcome all I can see 102 plus participants who are there today from across various stakeholder groups. We'll try to make this 1.5 hours program interesting, and I'm sure with such a galaxy of knowledgeable speakers, we will cover all possible aspects and angles of the particular bill that we are talking about. So the plan is that I will first take about 7-8 minutes to talk about where is this pesticide bill coming from and why it is so important for Indian agriculture and Indian agrochemical industry. Followed by, we'll invite Ankit Virmani to analyze the specific provisions and clauses of this bill from a lawyer's lens, and tell us about what is new and what is missing in this bill. And after that understanding, I will invite all the other 3 eminent panelists one by one and ask them some specific questions which are important to understand the impact of this bill on the different stakeholders and Indian agriculture per se. And then I think the house will be open for overall question and answer. I'll just start with a small anecdote. I mean, it was great to see Raj starting with Merry Christmas and Hum Honge Kamyab. So today is a bit of a sad day for Indian cricket with the lowest score that India has ever done in the history of Test cricket. So it was your Hum Honge Kamyab was quite relevant in that context. So I hope better days are ahead of us for both Indian cricket and Indian agriculture. So I'll quickly share this presentation of mine. I hope the screen is visible to everybody. Raj, can you see the screen?
Yeah, very well, very well.
Thank you. So I'll just take a quick snapshot of what is going on in Indian agrochemical industry, and then leave the discussion for the other panelists to talk about. So Raj already talked about CropLife India. So these are the 15 member companies. As you can see, it's a good mix of multinationals, the largest agrochemical companies in the world, and also a lot of local Indian companies like PI, like Rallis, like Swal, which are members of CropLife. So yes, protection market in India, 95% of the molecules that are there in India today were all R&D driven industry like pharmaceuticals, with almost 7.5% of revenues, average revenues going into R&D. And one molecule takes a very long time and a cost of about 2,000 crores to be introduced, to be discovered, tested, and then introduced in the market. And combined R&D spend of all the 15 companies about $6 billion US. And also, by the way, CropLife is an international organization with presence in 91 countries. So we also bring in a lot of global understanding and good practices in terms of progressive and science-based policies. And we work very closely with the Indian government to introduce those progressive policies for the benefit of Indian farmers and Indian industry. So moving forward, these are some of the key challenges of Indian agriculture, as all of you know, being in agriculture. So, smallholder growers poses the single most important challenge in terms of, reaching out to them, in terms of introducing new technology, good practices, consistent practices, and also from a supply chain perspective in terms of getting their produce out to the market. Scarce resources, we all know. I think anecdotally, again, it seems that in 1950, 1 hectare used to feed 2 people, whereas in 2030, that same hectare will have to feed 5 people because of the population growth as well as shrinkage of land and water resources. So we have to produce more with less resources, which is a challenge for Indian agriculture. Slow gains in productivity. India lags behind many countries in many crops in terms of productivity best practices. So there is a big role of technology to improve agriculture productivity, which will help boost the farmer income, if not so much the food security, which we have already attained. Inadequate grower education, because of this diverse and spread out smallholder farmers, it is difficult to reach out and educate farmers on good agriculture practices, do's and don'ts, proper usage of crop protection products, proper usage of other technologies for their maximum benefit. And availability and cost of labor. We all know that, particularly during COVID and even before that, there was a structural change happening where agricultural labor was, found to be more difficult to find, particularly in states like Punjab and Haryana and everywhere else. And therefore, the cost of labor as a component of cost of production is going up over a period of time. Sorry. So this is the next slide. So very briefly, I wanted to talk about what is the role that agrochemical plays in Indian agriculture, so that we can use that in the context of the PMB discussion that is coming up. So with the vast agroclimatic diversity as well as climate change, which is happening, I think there is an ever-increasing need for crop protection product. And new diseases and pests are coming up. We have seen fall armyworm attacking maize crop across the world, and also in about 10 or 12 states in India. We have seen locusts coming up in northwestern states over the last 1 year. And there are many such examples which have happened in the past and are going to happen in the future with climate change and other things. And apparently according to FAO, 15 to 25% of crop can be lost due to pests. So you can imagine the role of crop protection product in ensuring food security for the growing population, as well as in doubling farmer income, because it has the direct can earn through selling his. I'm just talking about the industry, but also if you look at the farm workforce that is engaged, whose livelihood is dependent on technologies such as crop protection product. And India is a net export earner, net forex earner, net exporter, as we can see in the right-hand side of the chart, where we are seeing that the Indian agrochemical industry is about $6 billion in 2019. Which is part of the $65 billion global industry. India is the 3rd or 4th largest agrochemical player in the world. And we can see that the export supersedes the domestic market and also growing at a faster pace. And we can see the growth rates. The key competition is primarily with China, which is also growing at a very fast pace. And Indian strength is essentially, strong export presence, very high quality of production, growing this domestic market, the process chemistry expertise that exists, particularly in off-patent generics, which constitute about 70% of the market. So in agrochemical industry is very well poised to demonstrate the Honorable Prime Minister's call for Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. In fact, it is one of the 12 sectors which has been identified by the Government of India as champion sector, which means where India has a structural advantage to become a global manufacturing hub. So, good days are ahead of agrochemical industry, provided there is a robust, progressive and forward-looking policy to support its growth and development. Going forward, just a few facts about crop protection usage in India, because it is sometimes a very sensitive subject. A lot of people sometimes little disproportionately show concern about usage of crop protection product, which is essential, as I said, for food security and farmer livelihood. India uses only about 0.3 kg per hectare of crop protection vis-a-vis China, which is 13, Japan 12, Brazil 5. So we are a much lower user of crop protection product in terms of per hectare, in terms of land covered, which is where crop protection product is used. And if you see the cost of farming, and this is government statistics, it comes out that crop protection, the cost that the farmer pays for crop protection is less than 1% of his total cost, compared to fertilizer, which is close to 11%, labor, which is about 20%. So it is a small proportion of the cost of the farmer, but it has a big impact on the farmer's ultimate profitability. And globally, we have about 1175 molecules, active ingredients, as we call them. But India has only 270 for various reasons, which we will talk about during the course of the discussion. Even countries like Vietnam, Pakistan has 500 plus molecules, and of course, US, Europe, etc., etc. China has about, I believe, 1100 molecules. So one of the key requirement or facilitation that we expect is how do you get more molecule for the farmer so that he can fight the new emerging and variety of pests and diseases. And now we come to the Pesticide Management Bill, just a historical perspective. So the Insecticide Act was drafted in 1968 and enacted in 1972. So we are almost 50 years since we have started using the Insecticide Act. So there has been a lot of attempt made by various government in the past to introduce a new modern forward-looking pesticide management bill. The first one was introduced in 2008, but it was never, it never saw the light of the day. And the latest one, what we call Pesticide Management Bill 2020, was first draft was circulated in 2017 for stakeholder comments, and finally in March 2023, just before the lockdown struck the country, it was introduced, in fact, on the last day of Rajya Sabha in March, the upper house of parliament. And we expect that the bill will come up for discussion in the winter session whenever it opens. And forward-looking progressive PMB and both the acts and the rules, which really focuses on innovation and new product introduction, among other things, is what we are looking at. And what are the key industry expectations from PMB? This is just to give the background so that we keep that in mind when we have the discussion. Essentially, it's a great opportunity because we have learned a lot in the last 50 years with the Insecticide Act. So how can you take that learning into consideration and ensure that we have a forward-looking and science-based predictive regulatory regime under this PMB, which will help all stakeholders? So how do you facilitate Make in India? How do you increase ease of doing business for the industry? How do you promote innovation for new product as well as new technologies such as, let's say, drones, which are used in many other countries for application of crop protection products? And how do you work with the government to fulfill that agenda of making agrochemical a champion sector where India can become a global manufacturing hub? And from CropLife as an industry association, we have tracked this issue very closely together with our members. So there was a small 2-page flyer which was developed and widely circulated among members of parliament for their awareness and sensitization purpose. We very closely allied with the other industry associations in this country to form a unified industry view on this bill and its suggestions. We expressed the view in various forums, including seminars, workshops, and also media, and as well as very close interaction with the government officials and politicians and MPs one-on-one, including on the offenses and punishment clause. I'm sure Ankit is going to talk about it, which is one of the key concerns for industry, that minor offenses have been proposed under criminal proceeding, which is perhaps not the best thing to do for increasing ease of doing business. And as a result of all this, I'm happy to say that recently the PMB has been referred to the Standing Committee of Parliament, which consists of both ruling and opposition parties. They are going to review what is there in the bill, which is the right process of introducing any new bill and make it an act before it is declared as an act. So we are happy that that demand of ours has been kind of accepted by the government, and we look forward to having more close interaction with the standing committee on what these bills mean and how it can be improved. So that's it from my side. I will stop, share the screen, and I believe Raj will have the Q&A later on, right? So I can move to the next speaker.
Yeah, you can start moderating. See, something exciting news I would like to share besides the participants attendees here. Right now, we are live on YouTube, and I see about 55 people watching on YouTube too right now. So that's a spread we have about this thing. And my friends, we will be taking questions from the audience. I'm sure most of your questions will be answered during the deliberations now. But still, stay back and we'll surely take questions from you, and you can talk to your respective panelists, whomever you feel like. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Raj. So with this, I will now invite Mr. Ankit Virmani, who is a partner from Virmani and Virmani. He will look at the bill with a lawyer's lens and basically talk about what are the new key new features introduced in this bill. What is missing, what is the purpose of this bill in the first place, and also his interpretation of what it means in terms of its impact on different stakeholders. So over to you, Ankit.
Thank you, Asitava, and thank you, Raj, for having me over. I'm quite overwhelmed by the experience and expertise of the panel that we have here, and I've learned so much from all of them over the last few years. I will share a presentation, and I'll take around 20 minutes. Asitava, if I'm overshooting my time, please do let me know. Is my screen visible?
Sure.
I will try to focus on some of the key features. There is still more that is left out of this presentation, but at least a few basic points that I thought were important is what I would like to present to all of you. The first thing that I would like to discuss is the purpose of the legislation. So as Asitava had mentioned, we have the Insecticides Act 1968. It's an age-old legislation. The stated purpose of this new legislation now is to sort of replace this Insecticides Act of 1968. They feel it is outdated and suffers from deficiencies. Some of the deficiencies that the government has pointed out in this bill are that there's lack of sufficient deterrence against violations. There are no strict penalties. There's no mechanism to regulate pricing, no mechanism to regulate disposal of insecticides or pesticides in an environmentally sound manner. It's important to align with India's international obligations, and stricter penalties are needed, and they're the need of the hour, according to the government, because of the current prevailing situation, according to the government, where there's rampant availability of pesticides of dubious and deceptive identity, composition, and source. And as a practitioner, I have also come across these complaints even from the industry. So there is definitely something that does need to be done. So the purpose does seem to be something that needs to be going forward, except maybe regulation of pricing is something that is a bit controversial. But moving forward, the PMB has very categorically spelled out what is it that it is going to regulate. So the legislation itself, or the proposed legislation, says that it is going to regulate manufacture, import, packaging, labeling, pricing, storage, advertisement, sale, transport, distribution, use, and disposal of pesticides. So this is actually a wider scope than the earlier legislation. The highlighted points being pricing, advertisement, disposal. These points were not regulated at all by the earlier legislation. The other big thing in this legislation is that there is a focus also on the environment, whereas the earlier legislation was focused on health of humans and animals. This also refers specifically to the environment. Another big policy shift here that is sought to be made is that the regulation is with an endeavor to promote pesticides that are biological and based on traditional knowledge. So that's also a policy initiative of the government. Now, unlike the earlier legislation where what is an insecticide was not really defined and there was a schedule which was mentioned, the definition only said that a chemical which is named in the schedule or a mixture of chemicals of such named chemicals would be a pesticide or would be an insecticide. As opposed to that, in the present legislation, pesticide has been defined and the definition is quite an exhaustive one. So I'll just read this out for you. This is verbatim from the provision itself. Pesticide means any substance or mixture of substances, including a formulation of chemical or biological origin, intended for the intent. The use should be prevention, destruction, attracting, repelling, mitigating, or controlling any pest in agriculture, industry, pest control operations, public health, storage, or for ordinary use. Ordinary use means household use, for example, your good night, etc. And it also includes, so this is the definition includes certain things which otherwise may or may not have fallen within the normal meaning of the word pesticide. For example, a plant growth regulator, a defoliant, a desiccant, a fruit thinning agent, sprouting inhibitor, and there is a residuary provision which says any substance applied to crops either before or after harvest to protect them from deterioration during storage and transport. So therefore the definition is exhaustive. It even covers things which may or may not fall within the definition of pesticide with the aim to regulate all of them. Having said that, there is still a chance of some sort of ambiguity because here there is no specified schedule. So to cover that up, what they have done is they have now given the power to the registration committee, which is the committee which grants approvals for manufacture or import of pesticides in the country. It's an expert body to maintain a national register of pesticides and to say that this particular chemical has pesticidal properties. So that power has now been given to the registration committee, which was earlier with the central government, which had the power to modify the schedule under the earlier legislation. This legislation has a lot of new features. I will only point out some of the key features that are new as compared to the earlier legislation. The functions of the Central Pesticides Board, the earlier one was the Central Insecticides Board. It is an advisory body. It continues to be an advisory body, but with far greater functions. The advisory now specifically will go to various aspects such as good manufacturing practices, disposal criteria, standards of the laboratories. That's very important because that's something which has been lacking, I feel, in our country, having dealt with a lot of cases of misbranding, etc. Standards of laboratories, standards of working conditions of persons who are exposed to insecticides, standards for advertisement of pesticides. So this is something which is new. This board also has to frame protocols for dealing with poisoning occurrences and SOPs for medical facilities. I think this is a good new step because right now the governments deal with poisoning cases in a very knee-jerk reaction. Suddenly they'll think there are 10 poisoning cases. There are no SOPs to deal with them. Each doctor deals with them in an ad hoc manner. Some places, of course, where I think the industry and the government have spread awareness, they have now already established SOPs. But now this will be done by the Central Pesticides Board, which I think will be a more structured way to do it, and should also be very helpful as far as having full transparency as to and foresight as to what should be done in case of poisoning cases. We've seen that the governments, various state governments have taken a knee-jerk reaction and suddenly banned a whole host of pesticides, saying that there are certain poisoning cases. I think all of that can now be more streamlined, and banning can now take place only when we are very sure that despite following all these protocols, it is the insecticide itself which has really caused the problem, which right now is not being fully determined before bans are issued. Then you have research on several issues, including development of safer alternatives, monitoring pesticide residues, all very important functions that have been given to the pesticide board. The next very important feature is that the registration process and criteria have undergone substantial change. Now, the earlier process required the expert registration committee to look at safety and efficacy of the insecticide. Now, besides safety and efficacy, you have several other parameters such as necessity, end use, risk involved, availability of safer alternatives. Now, necessity has not been defined, unfortunately, and I strongly believe these terms should have been defined, considering that these criteria have to be applied before a pesticide can even be manufactured or imported into the country. So these are far-reaching consequences, these terms, but have not been defined. What is a safer alternative? When can you say a safer alternative is available? Is now all left to the discretion of the registration committee, which I think is over delegation of the legislative function. There should have been more guiding principle here. Now the registration committee can conduct independent testing and consult experts. These provisions are not there earlier. Different data parameters can now be laid down by the registration committee for registration for import and domestic manufacture. So you'll have a different set of data requirements for import, different for domestic manufacture. This is with the policy initiative of Make in India and encouraging domestic manufacturing. I'm not sure how far having different or an uneven playing field would go to serve that objective, but that's the stated policy objective. Also, there will be lesser data requirements for biopesticides, etc. So that's as far as the registration process is concerned. The registration committee, which was there under the earlier legislation as well, will now be given substantially greater powers. They will now have the power to review the registration granted to them. Earlier, registration was always there unless there was a ban by the central government. Now the registration committee can itself review the registration, suspend registrations, cancel registrations. These are powers that have now come in, or that will now come in. The registration committee also has the all-important power of notifying substances having pesticide properties and maintaining a pesticide register. And I'm assuming, although it's not so specifically stated in the law, that only if if the chemical that you want registration for is mentioned in the register, only then will you be given a registration, although that's not specifically stated. Then another thing which I think is significant is that the registration will now automatically be cancelled if they are not utilized. If you don't take a manufacturing license within 3 years of getting a registration for import or manufacture of pesticide, then for manufacture of a pesticide, then your registration will lapse. If you have an import registration, then if you don't take a manufacturing license or a sale license within a year, your registration will lapse. These changes have been brought in because I think a lot of people were sitting on registrations. That's believed to be the reason for bringing in this change. Then, very important feature, huge shift in favor of state governments in the licensing regime. So under the legislation for people outside of the pesticide industry, there is the first level of regulation is registration of insecticides, where the quality of the insecticide is checked. The second level is licensing. So after registration of an insecticide, each manufacturer, each seller has to get licenses. These licenses are basically determinative of whether you have proper facilities, storage facility, manufacturing facility, infrastructure, and things like that. Under the earlier legislation, the license formats, the application formats were given in the by the central government. The power was with the central government to lay down those formats and the basic criteria, and the state governments would then appoint licensing officers to implement those provisions. Now the power to give powers to licensing officers. So the power to confer power has been given to the state government. So there's much more discretion available with the state government. So each state will now potentially have a different licensing regime. They may have different requirements for application for license, different requirements as far as the terms and conditions of license are concerned. And that will definitely make it more difficult for the industry. Minimum requirements for obtaining license have been laid down: qualifications, infrastructure, premises, storage, transport. All these have to be laid down by the central government. I think this is a good move. Then terms and conditions of license to be determined by the licensing officer. So there will not be uniformity. I've mentioned that already. Amendments to license can only be done in the manner prescribed by the state government. So each state government can have different mechanism for or different criteria for amendments of licenses. Very significant new development. The state government now can require sale of extremely toxic and highly toxic categories of, so pesticides are classified based on their toxicological profile into various classifications of toxicity. So the extremely toxic and highly toxic categories can now be further regulated, and the state governments can say that they will only be sold by prescription, and they will appoint officers who will have some qualifications that the state government will again lay down. And only those officers can then give out the prescriptions, like doctors, for sale of those pesticides. I'm not sure how easy or feasible that would be, and that I'm sure my colleagues would throw more light on. Coming to the other key features, this is something which is a baffling provision in this particular proposed legislation, and I wish to highlight it. The license of any person who is convicted of any offense or any violation of this act can be mandatorily revoked, or will be mandatorily revoked. The provision does not say which license. So suppose I hold a manufacturing license and a product of mine is declared as misbranded, or there's a problem in the label, or even if it's a minor violation, will it be that my factory will be shut down, my manufacturing license will get taken away? There's no clarity. This is one of the most far-reaching provisions in this legislation. I think this is something which, if the legislation has gone to the standing committee, this is something that they must look at. Now coming to the other provisions, now there's no license needed for ordinary use pesticides, which may be notified by the government. These are household use pesticides, which are sold at shops, your local kirana stores or wherever. And therefore, the idea here is that every shop selling a Good Night or another mosquito repellent or something like that does not need a license for sale. Then there is a much more structured approach for dealing with pesticide poisoning cases. I've already discussed that. The next one being powers of central and state government to ban pesticides have been significantly enhanced. Now, this is also a significant variation from the earlier law. Under the earlier law, only the central government had the power, in consultation with the registration committee, to permanently ban a pesticide that had been registered prior to the ban. Now, the power to ban is given to central as well as state governments. The power is initially there can be a 1-year ban. The 1-year ban can be extended to 1.5 years while the RC reviews the product during this 1.5 years. Significantly, this temporary ban for 1.5 years, which can really take a product out of a market, can also be done not only on safety and environmental grounds, but also if that product is posing a barrier to international trade of agricultural commodities. Now, this again is a very significant development. I have not seen a provision like this earlier, and even in legislations of other countries. The genesis, of course, is the basmati rice issue that has arisen in India, where the European Union has laid down certain residue limits which are extremely low for some insecticides which were being put on the rice crop, which was being sold from India. And the government is now trying to ban those pesticides so that those pesticides are not sprayed on that rice crop. even though most of that rice crop is consumed in India. But that's really the genesis of this provision. So let's see how this pans out. This will be very interesting to see how it plays out in once the legislation is in force. Then both powers have both governments have the power to ask the registration committee to review the registration of any pesticide at any time, which means that Telangana government or Kerala government or UP government or any government can at any stage ask the registration committee to review the pesticide itself, not only within the state, but the registration status of the pesticide itself, which means its manufacturing or importability within the entire country. These are significant powers given to the central and state governments. Another significant feature, if India is a signatory to an agreement or a treaty under which an insecticide has been banned, then such an insecticide or a pesticide can be banned in India without even a review of its safety. So that's another significant measure. Coming to some other new features, there are several new offenses that have been now created. So these visit very heavy punishments and penalties. One of them is importing or exporting products which are in contravention of international treaties or agreements, even if there is no express bar on import or export of the product by the Indian government. Even then, it will be an offense. So this is significant. Then, if someone transports products which are registered only for export to any place other than directly en route the place of manufacture to place of export, and the goods are found anywhere else, that's an offense under the legislation, new legislation. Then it is an offense if you've given deceptive claims about efficacy. Now, what are deceptive claims about efficacy has unfortunately not been specifically laid down or spelled out in the legislation, but this will be something which will, I think, play out significantly in the new legislation, and there will definitely be a lot of cases where the pesticide inspector will claim that a product has a deceptive claim of efficacy if, say, there is a crop failure or something like that. Although crop failure can happen not only because of the pesticide quality, but because of various other factors, including the weather, the time the pesticide was applied, the soil conditions, the manner of application of any of these chemicals and things like that. So this is going to be something which will generate a lot of litigation. Then causing hurt, grievous hurt or death due to any contravention of the legislation has also been made punishable. It will be difficult to ascertain when a pesticide manufacturer has actually caused hurt or grievous hurt or death, or when it is because of, say, a wrong manner of application or not using the right PPE. It'll be a minefield as far as trials under these provisions are concerned. Now, stricter punishments, enhanced penalties have been given, and that's extremely good as far as it concerns spurious insecticides, etc. However, even for minor violations, for example, if there's a slight deviation from the approved composition, which may have no impact on public health or the environment, that will also be visited with imprisonment for up to 3 years or fine of 10 to 40 lakhs or both. So that's quite significant. One thing which I believe is something that the industry has is a big concern to the industry, is that this was a good opportunity to decriminalize some of the minor violations, as has been done under the Food Safety Act, which is a 2006 vintage, or the Companies Act of 2013, where if, say, there is a problem in the label, or there is a substandard product, but it doesn't really affect safety, or it's not unsafe, such food items have actually, for sale of such food items, manufacture of such food items, there's only an adjudication. It's like a quasi-civil or quasi-criminal. It can be categorized under either. But it's adjudication by an adjudication officer and not by the criminal court. Only a monetary fine is levied. There is no jail term. There is no stigma of criminal prosecution. Something like that could have been introduced here, where for the more serious offenses, you could have had imprisonment and criminal prosecution, and for the less serious violations, which may be minor or technical in nature, and which are bound to happen because no two samples will ever test exactly the same. One should have definitely had more lenient, taken a more lenient view and decriminalized for the sake of ease of doing business in India without in any manner compromising the safety aspects. Other features include now pesticide testing laboratories have been covered under the ambit of the legislation. Earlier, only the insecticide analysts had to be notified. Now the labs themselves will have to be notified. That's a welcome move. There'll be more regulation. The pesticide board will lay down standards. So that's a good thing, I feel.
Ankit, can you be a little thick?
I'm going to wrap up in 2 minutes. Disposal of pesticides is now regulated. The central government has a role to play. The pesticide board has a role to play in all this, and I think that's very significant from the environmental point of view. Price control is something that the entire industry has been quite surprised with. This is not an essential commodity under the Essential Commodities Act. In any event, is there a case of a persistent lack of competition, lack of availability, artificially high prices, rampant price fixation, price parallelism? That's something that the other panelists would be in a better position to say. But if not, then price control was something that I don't think was warranted. But having said that, the government will only set up an authority to control these prices if a situation of unfair price or non-availability arises. So let's see how the government actually uses its powers here. What is missing? Extremely important things that are missing are data protection. Now, again, this is a divisive subject among the industry, but it's India's international obligation under TRIPS to give some data protection, which includes the exclusivity of data or confidentiality of data. Different countries have adopted different approaches on this. The panelists would probably shed more light on this. Compounding of offenses. This was a great opportunity for compounding of offenses, not done. Nomination of responsible persons for each unit. This is very important. Now, as on today, the managing director of a company can be held liable for any misbranding, mislabeling claim anywhere across the country, even though there may be thousands of employees, multiple manufacturing units, but it's physically impossible for only one top man to be responsible for everything. So under other different legislations, like the food safety legislation, for each unit, each branch, now you can have different responsible persons. This was a good opportunity to have similar provisions, given the realities of the business today, but not been done. Time limit for processing of applications for registration. This was necessary for ease of doing business in India. I have seen registrations being prolonged and delayed, but there's no such provision. In fact, there was a provision in the earlier legislation, which is also not there. Now, as there is also talk of why there is no penalty on officers for negligence or wrongdoing. I think this stems from the fact that there have been extreme delays in handling of applications for registration, etc. But that doesn't visit the authority with consequence. So there should be accountability. That's something that has not been introduced. The transition is not smooth. Again, this is something that could be addressed even today if the bill has gone to the standing committee. The new registration committee to be formed within 6 months, but what would happen in the meanwhile not mentioned. Registration under the old act to continue for 2 years. But within 6 months, you need to apply for re-registration. But after application, if 2 years expire, what would happen if the RC is not yet decided on the registration applications? There'll be thousands and thousands of applications. I'm sure they won't be able to decide all those applications. There's nothing mentioned in the law. Would the registrations lapse? Perhaps they would if the law is as it is. So that's something that needs to be addressed. There's time to do this. Thank you. I'm sorry, I've overshot my time, I think.
No problem, Ankit. It was a brilliant presentation. Thank you very much. You covered everything very critically and analytically. So that will help everybody to understand what it means, and also, we'll be able to discuss some of these issues that you have highlighted in the subsequent discussion. So thank you very much. I will now, invite the 3 other eminent panelists one by one to share their views, and I will ask a few specific questions, starting with Dr. Mai. Dr. Mai, I have 2 questions for you, but maybe I will ask the first question now. You can answer it in the, let's say, for 3-4 minutes, and then I will come back to you after I go to the other 2 panelists. That way we can, have some change from speaker to speaker. So the first question, Dr. Mai, to you is that according to you and your organization, having worked with the government, inside the government for such a long time, how do you see the impact of this new bill on different stakeholders, government itself, industry, and most importantly, the impact on the farmers? So what do you think, sir?
Thank you. Are you able to, I am audible to you?
Yes, you're audible. You can speak a little louder, maybe.
Yeah.
A little louder. Thank you.
Just a minute. I think. Okay, now? Okay. Are you able to see here?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Let me first thank Ray Raj Agarwal for inviting me, because I am still getting old, but I think thanks that you are still calling me.
You're always welcome, sir. Sorry to interrupt, but you've been helping me so much with this. Earlier, sir was also there for 27 trap pesticides.
I was a little surprised that when you said PMB, what does it mean for pesticide industry? Actually, as I think all the speakers are all mainly from pesticide industry. I am not. So basically, I thought that what does it really mean to farmers? Or as I think Asitama said, it is for the other stakeholders also. It's very important. One thing which to me it appears that what is the hidden agenda of government behind in this lockdown period? If you see the events, I don't call it as a coincidence. It must have been a deliberate attempt. If you see January 31st, I think they banned tricyclohexyl and bupromycin for the rice crop. Then it was in February 13, pesticide management bill was introduced, and immediately on 23rd March, it was put to Rajya Sabha. I think he has already said about it. Now this is, PMB was lying for a very long time. Since my time, we were looking into it. But they started it during this pandemic. Then again, if you see, on 14th May, they used a draft order. That also was lying pending for a long time, Verma report. And then they brought this pesticide. So on 7th July, they have a draft order of restriction of glyphosate. If you see the events, I don't call it as a coincidence.
Doctor, sorry to interrupt. Dr. Mai, sorry to interrupt. Can't hear you. Can you increase the volume of your laptop you're using, or maybe you can be a little closer to the. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now are you able to hear?
Fantastic.
Okay. So that is what I said, that it is not a coincidence. I think government has a.
Just hold the mic closer to your mouth, doctor.
Government has a plan. I think it's okay.
Yes.
Are you able to hear now?
Yes, yes.
So, the question which he has raised is that there are, of course, a lot of implications for the stakeholder. Particularly, I would say that I think Mr. Ankit has already analyzed most of the laws which are already given to them. But the basic issue what farmers will suffer, I would make stakeholders, particularly farmers, that if you are not able to have data protection, which I think the new bill says, it will harm, because we are not able to get new products in the country, and the farmers is ultimately suffering. What happened is, also there are no clauses. For example, we had, as somebody says, that we have fall armyworm which has come all of a sudden. Then locust has come all of a sudden, and we didn't have any product for that. But then emergency product has been approved in the whole system. I think there has to be a provision, something like that. Otherwise, farmers will suffer. And by the time the incident occurs, it is too late sometimes to have approval of such product. That is one. Second thing is, there is no enabling innovation technology. I would say that I think there is no encouragement for the researchers in India to do some innovation in this particular thing. I think these two, to me, are a very important consideration for you. And then the third, which I often always say, is that how this, they have no provision. They have not made any kind of thing where the responsible use of pesticides should have been how to be promoted there. There are a lot of laws. You have more jurisprudence. You are given so again we are coming back to license Raj, which is already creating problems with the earlier laws. My point is that the more clauses you put, there will be more kind of what we call it as license Raj, and corruption will increase. That is the basic issue which we wanted to hamper in the earlier stage. And that corruption also ultimately affects the farmers because they are the sufferers, because they will not get the good product. There are, of course, good provisions for what we call it as a duplicate pesticides. They are contaminated pesticides. But again, in all these situations, you know, what has happened in the earlier cases, when we got hold of some of those fellows, they could get released within no time. So I think the law must be in such a way that these punishments have to be in a time-bound manner, and they should be of permanent nature. Otherwise, they will start consuming. I think this is my first reaction to what Asitava has said about the impact of the PMB on the other stakeholders. Industry stakeholder, you are going to talk to. Okay. Thank you, Asitava. I think any other question?
Thank you, Dr. Mai. Thank you very much. You have answered the question perfectly as you understand it. Thank you very much. I'll come back to you again for the other question. So the next question is to Mr. Anil Kakkar. Mr. Kakkar, the question is about the offenses and punishment section, which Ankit Virmani also talked about in his presentation, that there was an opportunity to decriminalize the act like they have done for other acts, but it has not been done. So what do you think is going to be the possible impact of this on agrochemical industry per se? And what are the better suggestions on this particular aspect?
Yeah, as Ankit mentioned about these, am I audible properly?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So as Ankit mentioned that these enabling provisions, I think it is leaving a kind of a fear in the industry. Maybe what has been talked about is that there is a lot of noise that there are some spurious pesticides available. And that is why the government has come up with this act so that to penalize everybody with a heavy hand. I think we need to understand if the intent of the government has been right. Let's understand how this subject can be dealt, and probably out of that only the suggestion also would come. See, we are all dealing with the active ingredient products, and say an active product can have a particular percentage, say 10% is the product percentage. With a little bit of variation and a small violation, whether it is a violation of little bit in terms of analysis, or it's a violation in terms of what is written on the label or a misprinted label, everything becomes a violation. Now, there is a one part of violation that there is a minor violation, which has got no impact on the safety or on the environment or anything to be done. While there is a second class of the products, which I think the government is more worried about, whether we call them as spurious pesticides. Now, against, as I said, that something which is 10%, if somebody makes 0.5% or 1%, that is a huge, vast difference. Now, that's a spurious product. So there is another class, which is a counterfeit product. Fast selling good products of the companies, people just counterfeit those products. They just put look-alike into the market. So if that is the intent of the government to deal with the counterfeit products, or to deal with the spurious products, or to deal with the adulterated products. Now, the government, as the law also says, wants to promote biopesticides. But in the agriculture at the moment, perhaps there is some market in which the biopesticides laced with unregistered pesticides is also being made available. So if these are the intent of the government to control, they need to differentiate the penal provisions applicable to the genuine players where there are minor violations and there are severe violations. Now, I think if the government accepts this suggestion, that if the violation is not major, it's a minor violation, then it should be treated in a different category, which should be decriminalized, so that the compounding can be allowed on that, there can be civil cases on that, and this can be handled so that all the companies who are genuinely manufacturing the products, having research laboratories, having analytical laboratories, many of us, we have got NABL accredited laboratories, many of us, we are exporting products all over the globe, we don't face such problems. So the minor variations should be dealt separately. There should be no criminal offenses dealt on that. And the rest of the items which I have just mentioned, I don't wish to repeat, anything which is called as spurious should be dealt with a heavy hand. So I think if this separation can be done, it will be very useful for the industry. Because in the current provisions, and even in 1968 Act, any of these violations, directly the directors of the companies are being called and they are getting penalized. Now, many of the multinational companies, we know that the directors are sitting abroad. Now, what is the kind of impression that we would leave on those managing directors or directors of the companies, and also the investors into the company? As we, India, wants more investments, I think we should ease of doing business, healthy atmosphere to work. We don't wish as an industry, nobody recommends that these spurious pesticides should not be dealt. Maybe I think that industry is keeping quiet. They are not coming forward because they feel that a genuine industry is going to protect, because they are going to go to the government and say, change these laws. But I think our advice is to create two separate categories and not just deal in the same manner. Like in the traffic violation, if you park your car, stop your car on the zebra crossing, the violation is different. And if you hit a person and kill a person on the road, the violation is different. So if a segregation can be done, I think that is the suggestion. I think Ankit has also mentioned about the Food Safety Act. So we should draw parallels from there. Food is something which is directly consumed. So if there can be the provisions that there is only a monetary penalty in such nominal or minor variations, so if that can be taken up by the government, there is also a suggestion that whenever there has to be a provision that we have, companies have several factories and there are responsible people working in the factories, they should be nominated. And if any even minor variation cases are to be taken, the nominated person should be held responsible and not the managing director of the company. And I think if this is done, the confidence of the investors, confidence of the seniors in the company, in this industry would gain much more momentum. We are looking forward to more and more to be produced. And I think a healthy debate on this should be done. The government should call for a dialogue, clearly understand that the government laboratories itself are not very well equipped. When they analyze the sample, the standard of the sample, standard with which they are comparing, that itself may not be right. The method of analysis may not be right. We demand chromatograms to compare whether the analysis done by the government is right. We also demand a joint analysis to be done, and then you can prove whether it is a minor variation or a major violation. Major variations, please take stricter actions. Minor variations, they should not be treated in the same clause, and there should be no penal provisions for that. In fact, compounding should be allowed on that, and that will make everybody's life easy and promotion of this industry in a much better manner. I think I've answered that your question within time. Asitva, you are on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, Mr. Kakkar, you have answered the question very perfectly in a very balanced manner. You have talked about the lab's quality. You have talked about intentional mistakes versus minor errors, and to differentiate the two, which is there in many acts, and that is the better practice to attract investment and increase ease of doing business. So thank you very much, Mr. Kakkar. Next question is to Mr. Ajay, Dr. Ajay Kumar. Dr. Kumar, my question is about the need for new molecules through innovation that we talked about in our deliberation. And the PMB perhaps is not addressing that issue very well, particularly the provision of data protection, which is the international good practice, as well as obligation of India under the TRIPS agreement, as Ankit had mentioned. So maybe you can educate us about what is data protection and how is it going to help, and what is the recommendation from our side to the government on the provision of data protection and supporting innovation for the benefit of the farmers.
Thanks, Asitawa. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. Give me 30 seconds to divert from your question, and then I'll tie up the question. This PMB has been going on since 2008, I believe, and more than 12 years have passed. And so many questions, so many analysis, so many committees, and still nobody is happy with the PMB 2020. Now, when we were dealing with the Newtonian mechanics, it very lucidly analyzed how the motion takes place on the earth. But when we are dealing with the interstellar motions, it was found wanting. So what did Einstein do? He questioned the basic postulates. And what is the basic postulate? That time is relative, it's not absolute, and the speed of light is constant in a vacuum. Similarly, this PMB now. PMB, if it is raising so many questions and doubts, the basic postulates must be questioned. And what are those basic postulates? PMB is not to regulate the industry. When we see the intent with the manufacturing, licensing, advertisement, trade, etc., etc., etc. But what should be the basic postulate of PMB? PMB is to protect the farmers' crops from losses and enable the farmers to get the most innovative product very quickly. So if these are the two postulates, then how do you do it? You encourage or provide the environment where industry can innovate and bring the product quickly to the farmer so that he can protect his farm and the crop. Now, something around $500 million are required or I spend to find a new molecule and bring it to the market. And it takes almost a decade. Now, if you don't protect the data for this new molecule to be brought in, then why would somebody innovate? And why would somebody bring it in? Today, the truth is that the entire R&D is in the private sector. The private sector is not a philanthropic institution. It's a commercial venture which gets the profit to its stakeholders and bring protection and the satisfaction to its consumers. So to allow it to bring it to the consumer, you will have to provide the data protection so that new molecules can be brought into India. You have already in your presentation mentioned more than 1,100 molecules globally. India uses something, registrations are for 280, and I'll get one more data. Only 75 molecules in its variants or its combinations are used actually in India commercially. So, and one of the studies of the ICAR says something around 80,000 crores worth crops are lost to weeds only. So the pesticide industry globally is moving very fast. Both from the mode of action and the usage levels. Now it is moving toward the pesticide in the direction of the pharma industry. We have now molecules which are not used in kgs, which are used in grams. 10 grams per hectare is one of our molecules of whatever is used. Now imagine the kind of environmental benefits it brings, not only for the farmers in the field, environmentally, but also in the manufacturing. The carbon or the environmental footprint is so low. But all this is possible only if you provide the data protection to the industry to bring the molecules quickly. One last example of this, or the proof point. In 2016-17, some 40 molecules lost the patent rights. Only 7 have been introduced in India. If you provide the data protection, the companies would have brought in at least 25, 30 new molecules for the farmers to be benefited from it. Forget about the restriction clauses and the problems, but the simple data protection would have done it, and innovation. So check the basic postulate of the PMB. It is to benefit the farmers, not to regulate the industry, or regulate the industry for the benefit of the farmers. And everything will fall in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Yeah, thank you for making it very clear what is the role of data protection and intellectual property protection to help introduce new molecules for the benefit of the farmer. So I will now come back again to Dr. C.D. Mahi on my second question as to what, according to Dr. Mahi, are your suggestions that we can put forth in front of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, which can make the bill better, addressing some of the concerns that you have mentioned earlier, particularly taking all the learning of the 50 years through the Insecticide Act. What are your suggestions for improvement?
Thank you. I think I would like to show you a book which we have very recently released at the hands of Honorable Minister Gadkari Sahab. Probably you have seen this is published by our SABC. This is called as Crop Health Management, an Indian Story. And here it is basically pesticide. And even there is a chapter on PMB. What are the suggestions, what are important things that the government should do has already been narrated. I would request the industry to really purchase some of these copies, and you can always show it to the people. This is just, I thought this is an opportunity to you. Thank you for the question. I think one most important suggestion which I would like to give.
Dr. Mahi, can you please put the, yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Basically, I would like to, are you able to hear now? Are you able to hear?
Yes, doctor. Yes, doctor.
Number one suggestion is the clause of state-center relationship.
Doctor, can you remove the thumb from your speaker? I mean, mic. You're putting the thumb on the mic. Just hold the wire. Okay. Yes.
I think what my first is the center-state clause.
Little above near your lips. Closer to your lips. Sorry.
I think the mic is not working.
Your things are very valuable. That's it.
Yeah. Are you able to hear now?
This is perfect.
Right. My first suggestion would be, I think they will have to modify the center-state clauses which have been given. Now they say wide powers are given to states, but there is no harmony between the states. Today, what you see in the education of farmers, you must have already noticed that it is the fight not for the farm laws, it is the fight between the states and center. And I think in pesticide also this is going to happen. Who will suffer ultimately? It is the farmer who will suffer. I don't think any other reason. So we'll have to see what kind of controls central wants on pesticide. There should be some uniform, or what I call it as a coordination committee or a harmonization fertilization. Otherwise, each state will apply their own type, and it will be horrible for both the farmers as well as the all stakeholders. That is one clause. Second thing is the application methodology or technology has not been mentioned. Precision application now in these cases, like what you see, drone application and other things, I think we need to have some kind of an education there. So I think this pesticide bill, when they are talking about it, they must talk about the equipment of precise application technology. I think that is another very important. And the third clause to me is the capacity building. Today, I think Anil has very rightly said, the labs which are now for this analysis of pesticides, there are the qualified people. I can't work. The whole problem in my country today is that I need a boss who is an intelligent fellow. But today, if I have to work with a duffer, I don't think we'll be able to progress anywhere. So these are some of those things which I think we need to really implement them. Otherwise, what will happen is that we have all, even the government labs, there is no faith left of the industry that whatever chromatogram they are giving. I think what Anil has very rightly said. So my point is that we need good manpower. Now this good manpower, you will see always there is a shortage of people. So government also must think in that direction that who are those qualified people. Otherwise it can be in a PPP mode wonderfully managed. So these are some of my things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mai, to answer the question very lucidly and clearly. Mr. Agarwal, I think we are doing good on time, so we can have another round of questions.
Yes.
Both Mr. Kakkar and Dr. Kumar, and then we can open it up for general question and answer.
And
so the next question
can also add something he feels like.
Yes, absolutely. So my next question is again to Mr. Anil Kakkar. Mr. Kakkar, could you, I have two questions, if you can answer them in brief. One is, whatever we are talking about on the role of the RC and on the regulatory front, whether it is, lack of commitment of the timeline or re-registration within 2 years and other provisions, what it implies according to your experience. And the second question is, again, this disharmony between state and center, which can potentially reduce ease of doing business. So these are my two questions. Firstly, on the regulatory side, the provisions, what it implies, and secondly, what is your thought on how do you balance between the powers given to the center and the state to regulate insecticides? Thank you.
Thank you, Sidwa. Both questions are quite relevant and important. I would limit my answers to justify the time. So I think the intent, we really don't know what has been the intent, why 2 years period has been announced that all the products which are currently registered, within 2 years, they will called as re-registered. Does it mean that if any product which has been used for 10 years, 20 years, thoroughly registered, no issues, then you will take 2 years time to re-register it? And look at the kind of volume of work that will come onto our Central Insecticide Board. All of us in the industry, we are aware that when a new molecule gets registered, it doesn't, we are talking of 2 years. I think it takes more than 2 years for a file to get cleared at Faridabad. And if so much of load of work is put onto them to register all the products from stock, then it's going to be a Herculean task. And there is a lack of availability of manpower. I think this is not a right provision, and government must look at this, that why there should be, I think the primary focus has to be on registering new molecules, giving new registrations, export registrations. That itself is a big task. And I have one suggestion that as we all had gone through one Balram committee. I think the general practice is that the government forms certain committees. There are very nice recommendations that they come, but they don't get implemented. So I think when such a subject is getting discussed, I think we should take cognizance of how to refine the registration committee, what should be done as a process in registration committee. It was elaborately talked in Balram committee, and we should take some leaf out of suggestions out of that committee and then go in for implementation. That's a brief answer to your first question. And while talking about these powers to state, I think we are a country in which the registration process has only been controlled by the central government, because they are the one who analyze the data. And the current provision gives them a power to states to restrict the use or ban the product use for 60 days, extendable by another 30 days. Now with this provision, if it goes to 1 year, 1.5 years, then what are we going to achieve? See, I will make two just points, that there is always a question of risk-based analysis. Now, Dr. Mai would know that, and he would support that India has always followed the risk-based analysis. Now, the NGOs, they follow the talks-based analysis. They just pick up certain news from the net and they directly take those news to the media and they create a lot of noise that the product should get banned. When there is a noise in media and social media, the politicians, they come under pressure. So the current situation is at least the center gets into the action and it goes to the center government to issue a draft notification, which we all know that 27 draft notification or a glyphosate PCO notification that is issued by center. Now you are going to give powers to the states. So we can all expect that every month there can be a new notification coming from a state without application of a technical or a scientific evaluation of the data. They don't even possess the data. How would they analyze and comment on that this product should be restricted? And if you restrict for a year, industry is not going to switch off and switch on. You operate for 1 year, you don't operate for 1 year. And the nitty-gritties of that, Ankit has already mentioned. The earlier provision said that if a batch has a problem, you restrict the batch. Now, instead of batch, it is going to a product, it's going to a class of product. I think these provisions are not very, very good to be taken up. There again, like I would say, there is one more point, maybe Asitwa, I would like to say that the government was very keen and the Prime Minister made a statement that doubling the farmer income is important. And Dr. Dalwai committee was one committee who made a lot of recommendations that how the doubling of the farmer income can take place. I think this whole PMB does not take cognizance of any of his recommendations. I would vouch for it that in the MSP, even today, the farm laws, whatever issues are going on, everybody is referring to Dr. Swaminathan and his recommendations. So like that, if there is a recommendation, earlier I said of Balram committee, Dalwai committee, they should be taken into cognizance and a lot of work on that has been done and they should be given as a part of due consideration in PMB. That is what my point would be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thakkar. To talk about the need for risk and science-based approach rather than the other kind of approach which can destabilize the equilibrium. So one more question to Dr. Ajay Kumar. This is about the provision, the enabling provision for price control, which is part of the PMB. So what are your views on this? Is it required? Is it at all justified? What is going to be the impact of such a provision if it is enacted in future?
Thanks, Asitwa. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Your voice is a little muffled. I don't know what's the reason.
Probably, Dr. Ajay, I don't know if, I think you have totally closed your doors and all. That's a little echoing. Anyway, you can go ahead.
So, Asitwa, again, the question is, who is going to be benefited and why it is being done or suggested? The total cost of pesticide is only 3%, less than 3% of total production cost. And by trying to control the price, does government mean that more and more newer molecules of the pesticides would be available to the farmers? Well, the answer is very obvious, no. I'll give you a recent proof point. 2 years back, when the menace of FAW4 fall armyworm was detected, companies brought forward their new products. We were actually one to bring forward Spinteron. And the government and registration committee took a very proactive view to clear some products immediately for the use of the farmers. The situation was pretty grave. Now, hypothetically imagine a situation where the government says that we will be controlling the price of this molecule which you are going to sell to the farmers in an emergency situation. Would any company give its product? Answer is again very obvious, no. So you have to keep in mind that your ultimate consumer, the client, for whom you are legislating is the farmer. keep only those provisions which allow farmer to get the best pesticide, newest pesticide, and the environmentally most safe pesticide for use. And price control goes against this very aim. So I will stop here because the answers are very obvious. The price control is exactly opposite to making the product available to the farmers quickly and safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ajay Kumar. So looking at the watch, which is beyond 6:30 almost, maybe it has been a pleasure for me to moderate this discussion, and thank you for all of you for answering all the questions that I had. At this point of time, Raj, if you have any more questions, or would you like to invite some questions from the audience?
Yeah. Thanks. It's an awesome and an intellectual discussion happening amongst all of us. Ankit, would you like to, of course, on behalf of Asiteva, I would probably put this question to Ankit before I take questions from the audience. Ankit, would you like to add your observations based on, you heard all of, Dr. Mai, Dr. Ajay, and Mr. Anil speaking. You have something to offer?
I think most of them have, summed up the key concerns of the industry quite well. I do believe that this is something. I don't believe that there is no necessity for a new law, but I do believe that the government could do well by listening to some of these concerns. These are going to benefit not only the industry, but I feel all the other stakeholders as well. And therefore, I think the way forward, as I would see it, would be to have a healthy discussion and a debate with the stakeholders, and also draft the legislation in consultation with the stakeholders. Because what has been happening is, as someone had mentioned earlier, this has been going on since 2008. So a round of discussion or something like that happens. But the law that gets churned out is at odds with the discussion. So probably even the drafting can happen in consultation with the stakeholders, whether it's farmer representatives, industry representatives, of course the government is involved. I think that's what will help us take us down the right path.
Thanks. Friends, if you have some questions to put to the panelists, I request you to raise your hands to the your participants thing. Dr. Mai is speaking something. Dr. Yes.
Are you able to hear now?
Yes.
One thing is that I think the industry must look into the excessive jurisdiction, because this has been pointed out by, I think, every organization earlier. Because if you compare, as I think Ankit rightly said, the other laws, this has been quite fairly reduced. Why in pesticide it has been increased? A punishment for a simple thing for 3 to 5 years in prison, and 5 to 10 lakh is a punishment. I think these looks very something which is very hard within that, because PM has been often telling that we need, otherwise no businessman will come into a good business, and there will be more of kind of spurious business fellows. Not only spurious pesticide, spurious business fellows also will enter into it. I think that is the most dangerous part which has happened in seed. That's why I'm afraid, because this can happen here also. Already because of your Me Too, we have spoiled the entire game of pesticide. So there also we need a lot of restrictions. Otherwise, this will go like this only. Hundreds of registration and nothing will come.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll go to the questions. Friends, before I take questions, I have a small kind of an announcement. I'm moderating one panel discussion on Ahmedabad. As you see on the slide, on a very critical subject, recent farm bills. What I suggested to them was that, instead of talking only to the industry, why not we include the little farmers representatives also? So I would be moderating this discussion along with Amit Mundawala, Mr. Ram Kondenia, and two farmer leaders, Mr. Kunal Reddy and Ajay Veer Jharkhand. So I'm looking forward for an exciting discussion then. I am sharing with you in the chat box the details and the link to register. So please feel free to register, and if time permits, you can listen to me. This is on 26th December, of the next day of the Christmas. So we'll have some time to listen to. So I have a lot of hands going up. So let me take a question from Mr. Sudhir Goyal first. Sudhirji, please unmute and introduce yourself and be specific on the question.
Yeah. I am former Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra. My question is regarding data protection. This is something which has vertically split the industry. On one side, the industry players talk about the patent regime is enough, and beyond that should be Make in India, it should take over. On the other side, the industry says, no, it is not enough, there should be data protection. Would someone enlighten why should there be a data protection beyond the patent regime?
Maybe I can try to answer that question, Dr. Goyal, and then Dr. Ajay Kumar can add his point of view. Dr. Mahi can also add his point of view. So thank you for that question, Dr. Goyal. We have been discussing this offline also. I agree that on data protection, there are conflicting views within the industry, and our only suggestion to the government is to listen to both sides and come to a impartial decision rather than keeping it hanging. Which is in the interest of the farmer, not in the interest of either this part of the industry or that part of the industry, what is beneficial for the farmers. And they have enough information and background material to take a decision if they wish to. So just to clarify your specific question, patent and data protection are two different topics altogether. Patent is for a new product which is globally introduced, which typically has a 20-year in patent, and we are not asking for data protection which are already covered under patent. We are talking about new molecules which are coming to India, which are not under patent. They have become generic, but they are still coming to India for the first time. The reason is that for such molecules which are coming for the first time to the country, the original registrant typically spends, and we have data to prove this, typically spends between 15 to 20 crores for doing local studies, whether it is to environment, health, safety, and all those kind of studies, which is required by the registration committee to give registration to that off-patent generic molecule. So typically they spend between 15 to 20 crores, and also that takes about 4 to 5 years. And then in addition to that, responsible companies spend between 20 to 30 crores on stewardship. How do you train the farmer? How do you talk about how to use that product? So there's a lot of money and effort spent. So there is an investment about close to 40 to 50 crores to introduce that molecule to the country. Vis-a-vis, without data protection, a Me Too registrant can simply spend, according to our calculation, between 50 to 70 lakhs, 50 to 70 lakhs versus 40 to 50 crores to get the same product to the market as soon as they see that product is successful. So this is, in our opinion, not level playing field. And also this is discouraging companies to introduce new products, as Dr. Ajay Kumar said. And also it is an obligation under TRIPS, according to our understanding, and Ankit can highlight that or add to that. And lastly, it is also an international best practice. Countries like China, which is not really known for intellectual data protection, even they have 6-year data protection. Typically, countries have between 5 to 15 years of data protection. So we are asking for a minimum of 3 to 5 years of data protection, which will help introduce new molecules. So if anybody else has anything to add to this, Ankit or Dr. Mahi or Ajay, please go ahead.
Yes, you have very well explained the difference between the patent and the data protection that is being sought. Now, a false binary is being created that data protection is injurious to Make in India. Now, if you provide the data protection, in any case the molecule is coming. and that molecule needs to be produced. It is irrespective of whether too many more manufacturers take advantage of the data of the companies who bringing the molecule and take the registration to produce. So this binary is not right. And I gave the example earlier, 2016-17, 40 patents were over, only 7 molecules were registered in India. So actually, lack of data protection goes against the Make in India. These are not diametrically opposite or mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand together. Thank you.
I would only like to add that as far as data protection is concerned, under TRIPS, I would refer you to Article 39.3 of TRIPS. And TRIPS is India's international obligation. Data protection, as Asitawa has ably explained, is different from patents. Legally speaking, a patent is sort of a limited proprietorship on novelty, whereas data protection is a protection offered because you have to offer up your data, which has been generated at a lot of cost and effort, to a regulatory authority. And that data, because you have to give that data to get an approval, in return, your data must be protected for at least some period of time as a recognition of the effort that you've put in. And this is a step towards innovation. So therefore, there always has to be a trade-off between data protection and availability of Me Too registrations. Yes, Me Too registrations are important to promote competition, but data protection is important for innovation. So one has to have a balance, and one cannot go without the other is what I feel, although I'm not part of the industry. But that's how the law has progressed. And if you see various countries, for example, Australia, and as Dr. Ajay Kumar pointed out, even China, they have all given data the term is data exclusivity. They have all given data exclusivity to the first registrant for a limited period of time. So it's not like the patent protection, which is available for a 20-year period or a 15-year, depending on which country you go to. But this is available only for a limited period of 3 years to 5 years, etc., as a recognition of the effort. And Satwant Reddy committee, which was constituted by the government of India to examine India's data protection obligations under TRIPS, has clearly distinguished between pharma and agrochemicals to say that pharma doesn't need data exclusivity, but agrochemicals, because of this high cost, I think, which Asita was mentioning, because of this reason, data protection is something that needs to be given to agrochemicals. That's the peculiarity. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mr. Goel. I'll take Radheshyamji. Mr. Radheshyam, can you introduce quickly and put the question? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Myself, Radheshyam, working with the Endofil as senior product manager for herbicide and fungicides. As I worked with Ankit, my question is that as per new PMB bill, government is saying that when state can decide the ban of any pesticides because of their health related issues. When a pesticide registers in India, we submit every data to CIB. How can state can ban a product when we have given the data to center? On what basis, on health concerns, they can evaluate the pesticide? Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Radheshyam. That's a good question that you asked. What is the wherewithal of the state is a and that is why giving the state government a ban for 1 year.
Radheshyam, can you mute your phone? Sorry, your mic. Yeah, thank you.
This is one of the reasons, the reason pointed out by you, I think, is one of the reasons why it may be something for the government to consider as to whether to give powers to issue temporary bans for 1.5 years when a product has already been evaluated and without there being a scientific review of that product. So this is something that needs to be borne in mind. Having said that, if a situation arises where a ban has been issued, number one, the provision does say that it should you should have formed an opinion that the product is unsafe. Now you can take help of other experts, third-party agency, etc. That's possible theoretically for the state government to do, to come to a preliminary conclusion. And while the RC is reviewing the product, they can always send it to the RC to review it further. So you would need a very, very responsible state government to really follow the spirit of this law, which I think may or may not get followed in different cases.
I think that yes, Mr. Anil.
Raj, I would just like to add one sentence to Radhesham's question. And what Ankit you said, see, the difference is that the debate has to be on the data and on the study and not on the perceived value and the perception. I think our point is that if the state has a data against the data which we have presented, in our experience, we have seen the state governments, they just come out with some recommendations which are not based on any data. So that is the point. If the data is there, then a debate can take place. The data is sitting with the center, and the state will bring in some action based on some perception. I think you have rightly pointed out that one needs to be very, very mature to take an action, and we know the way the functioning is taking place. I thought I'd just add up to that.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Anil. I take the last question from Mr. R.K. Muthukia. Please introduce yourself and put the question. Are you there?
He's on mute. He has to unmute.
Please unmute. I think, can you unmute Mr. Muthukia? I think is probably.
Otherwise, you can read it out, Raj. That question is there in the Q&A. He's asking about provision in new PMB.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you can take that. Yeah. Is there any provision in new PMB to separate PGRs from CIB?
To separate PGPRs from CIB. Can you answer this question, anybody? This is a technical question. Anil, you have spending.
Yeah, Asitwa, I think, let me put it, I think Ankit had put one slide on the definition of pesticides, and he did say that even the desiccants and fruit thinning agents and all that has got covered in that definition. So as far as PGRs are concerned, PGRs are a part of insecticide schedule and also of the insecticide act at the moment. So PGRs, they have to...
Plant growth regulators, right?
PGR so, but I am differentiating. There is another class of the products which have been mentioned as fruit thinning agents and several other products which have been there in the category of biostimulants. No, biostimulants have not been put into this PMB, but as we know that there was a biostimulant guideline that was issued by the center, which it was clarified that, you know, it's not belonging to CIB, but it is getting associated closer to FCO, but a different class of products that was taken out as biostimulants. And definitely this question is very relevant, that while PMB is getting enacted, while various other things are done, it is important that the biostimulant category also should get a proper recognition, because there is a lot of product sale of those products taking place, and the government must look to that and regularize them. Because there also there are two types of companies. There are very genuine, rightly manufactured fermentation-based products, either coming from abroad or made in India. While if it is not regulated, then anybody can pack anything and say that this is biostimulant. And then we get into the same category as we just referred to as laced with insecticides. So I think his question was related to biostimulants. I think I have answered that question.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kakar. I think there was an awesome discussion. 2 hours just passed without realizing the time. And being a weekend, most of you must have planned for your long weekend with the Christmas and New Year around. Just not exactly word of caution, but let's be safe. We have been good so far. Hopefully, as we said, 2021 onwards, we'll have better times, and hopefully vaccine round the corner. Friends, my beautiful panelists, Dr. Ajay, Dr. Mai, Anil Kakarji, Ankit, and awesome moderation by Asitawa. Thank you so much for joining me to make this Ray Talks much more wonderful than what it used to be. It is. This is a very technical subject, as I said, and you saw the curiosity from the audience to understand more about it. And some of you who have missed, please visit our YouTube page, channel, YouTube/Ray Consulting, where not only this, which is right now live, which will be available in the future, but all the past talks are available on this channel. And to get the updates, though we keep sending 12,000, 13,000 emails, about 7,000 WhatsApp messages. In case you miss, you can visit our social handles of Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn to get the updates and keep watching us. So thank you so much, each one of you, for joining us. Asitawa, any parting words from not only you, from each one of you, for the audience and for me?
No, nothing more. I think it was a fantastic discussion. I personally thank everybody, including yourself, for organizing this and spending time. It's a very important topic for not only the industry, but also ultimately the farmers and Indian agriculture. So let's hope that 2021 brings a more pragmatic and forward-looking PMB. It's already a great effort, but it can be tweaked a little bit on the lines that we just discussed today. And it will last another 50 years.
Raj, as the name of your this Ray Consulting, it has a ray. So there is always a ray of hope.
My God.
2021 will be a very good year.
You got it right, sir. That's a very reason why the name of the company is Ray Consulting. And you see that slight slot on there, it's a hope. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.